Hi guys, today I'm doing a video where I'm only focusing on the cover letter, and I'm going to explain how you can create the perfect cover letter and what's really important to keep in mind when you are writing a cover letter for the German job market when you're trying to apply over here. I think writing a cover letter can take a lot of time, but it's worth it to invest this time. So today I'll try to keep it short, but it'll take some time to explain the details to make sure that you're getting all the things I usually mean when I'm mentioning some advice in my other videos. So I hope you stay tuned throughout the video. Let me share my screen with you, and then we can get started. um, so what's important to keep in mind when you're writing a cover letter? First of all, let me talk a bit about the structure and the formatting. First of all, formatting is really, really important. Don't underestimate it. Even if you're applying for a job where design doesn't really matter, you should still pay some attention to formatting from my point of view. In general, the cover letter should not be longer than 1 to 1.5 pages. In my opinion, it should not be longer than 1 page, because that's, the recruiter doesn't have a lot of time, and you have to be able to read it in a kind of quick way. And it also shows that you're able to keep it to the point. So from my perspective, it should not be longer than 1 page unless you're applying in a kind of more, scientific environment. Official institution standard can be a bit longer. Font size 12 is what I recommend. That's the usual standard. Appropriate line spacing, where it's easy to read but also not too far away from each other, the lines. So 1.15 is what we usually recommend. Then I'm often asked about font styles. I have mentioned a few here which I recommend, which are like the standard ones. You can also use a special font, but make sure that it's easily readable. So that's why I prefer to keep to the standard ones. Then one thing, I often recommend writing a cover letter in German, but if you do so, all your documents should be in German. Then your CV should also be in German. So use the same language for all the documents. And then also font and layout should also be the same for all the documents. So that's something you should really pay attention to. Make sure that when the recruiter goes through your documents, usually you will have a cover letter and a CV, and they will probably be lying next to each other, or the recruiter will look at them on their screen. So if they look completely different, it's kind of confusing, because you are one person, right, applying to this. So just make sure that it's nice and clean and the same design. It can even be a simple design, but it should look like as if you've invested some time in it. And then just to keep it in mind, in Germany, we do have a DIN letter format, for the whole formalities. So you can Google that when it comes to line spacing, and where to keep a space and where not to keep a space, and so on. Just Google it. It'll be helpful, for writing letters over here. So that's it about formatting, just to make sure that you're covering the basics. Let's talk a bit about the structure. So here we are using an example, it's a fake kind of cover letter, which we found on Indeed.com. I think, by the way, if you Google cover letters and templates, you will find a lot of great examples. So this is one of the more common examples, and it's an application for a software engineering position. So in general, you can see that, okay, here should always be personal data on the upper part. Then there should be a reference to the job ad you're applying for. Really important, don't forget to mention the job ad you're applying for, or the position you're applying for, because very often I see that people are missing out on this, and that's, it's very confusing for the recruiter. And then, of course, the important part is the content here. And you can see that it's structured in a certain way. So just as with any other text, you always have a kind of formal introduction, then you have a main part, and then you have a kind of ending or conclusion in your cover letter. And those are like the three parts which I'm going to talk about now. So talking about the introduction, that's the part over here, you know, the first paragraph. The introduction should not be longer than one paragraph. And if there's a contact person that's mentioned in the job post, then do address the cover letter to this person, to him or her. That makes it a bit more personal. Also, in some cases, you may have already been in touch with this person, and then it makes even more sense to you know, address it to him or her. Also, if you know someone over there, you could mention this person in the first paragraph. Then, of course, reference to the job ad you're applying for. That's something I already mentioned. So in this cover letter, this person has outlined the motivation to work for this kind of position. So just mentioning that, okay, I'm really motivated and excited to apply for this position. And that's it. Just formalities in the first paragraph. It's just a kind of introduction and orientation for the recruiter. Then comes the main part, which is, you know, mainly, I would say, the really, really important aspect of your cover letter. That's the part you should invest most time in. And that's also the part you should adapt from time to time to the job post you're applying for. So here it's all about showing your motivation to work for this specific job and for this specific company. That's something you should really showcase. And that's also why I'm always telling people to adapt their cover letter according to the position they are applying for, because the recruiter who's reading this CV, or the person you're probably going to work for in the future, should feel or get this kind of feeling that this is the only position you have always wanted to work for, and the one and only job you really, really want. So make sure that this is the kind of you know, insight or impression you can give, but don't make it too emotional. So in Germany, we like to be fact-based, as you probably already know. So you can emphasize your know-how, your experience, and your personal strength. So it should give a kind of overview. And then you should be specific from my point of view. So here in Germany, if you see job posts, usually you will find like the requirements for the job posts or the qualifications outlined. So what you can do is you can pick out 1 or 2 examples and then outline how you fulfill those criteria. So give specific examples. Over here, we like to be really specific, and very often I get applications where people are mentioning that, yeah, I'm a passionate worker, I'm a team player, and I'm a really great developer, and that's why I think I'm the perfect fit for this position. Okay, nice, but that's not really specific. You know, that's something any person could write. So make it specific. Give examples of your previous experience. Give an example of how you tackled a challenging situation, or how you improve KPIs in the organization you were working for, or I don't know, something specific which is relevant for the position you're applying for. Because that's what's making it personal, and that's also the part you can adapt from time to time depending on what's mentioned in the job post. That's how you will make the recruiter feel that, okay, this person has really invested like a kind of thought process into this application, and it's not just sending out, you know, masses of applications to any kind of job you're seeing online. So that's really important about the main part. And then you can always conclude with, you know, why you're the perfect fit and how you will contribute to the organization. That's just to sum it up. So in general, I would say, show your motivation, why you want to work for this company, outline your experience and make it very specific, give a few examples, and then conclude how the company is going to benefit from you. And then in the end, you have a closing, of course, which should also not be longer than 1 paragraph. So, oh yeah, by the way, that's something I forgot. The main part can be 2 paragraphs. So here in the example, that's also what you will see. 1 paragraph intro, 2 paragraphs main part, and then 1 paragraph in the end. So in the closing, it's all about, you know, mentioning the few most important details which are really relevant for the whole selection or hiring process, and that's your availability, which is really often forgotten by people. But you can save the recruiter time if you're mentioning your availability. Also, if you have a visa, you could mention it. And then include salary expectations. So if the company asks for salary expectations, then it has to be included in the last paragraph. That's where I would mention them. If they are asking for it, you definitely have to mention them. If salary expectations are not asked for, it's not mandatory, then it's up to you to decide. That's a kind of free choice you have. Then a few additional words about the style of writing, because I think that's also something which is really, really important. So as I mentioned in my other videos, write it in German if possible. If you're learning German, even if your German is not perfect, but if you feel that your proficiency is sufficient to write a proper text, then I can highly recommend you to write it in German and then get it proofread. But if you write it in German, make sure that you get it proofread by a native speaker, because it's visible for a native speaker if you have just used, like a translation tool, as all of us do from time to time. I do the same to improve, my English text, because it's not my mother tongue, of course, and that's something you'll be able to hear and also see when I'm writing stuff. But try to get it proofread. Then start early, take time to revise it, ask a friend to go through it, because you should really make sure that there are also no grammar or spelling mistakes. It's something I mentioned down here. So I think the cover letter is really important, because a recruiter, apart from screening your CV and all the things I mentioned about CVs in my other video, the cover letter is really important for your application. So it makes sense to invest some time in it. Then also another really important point, the cover letter should only be continuous text, written text, no bullet points. And that's the main difference to the CV. In your CV, you're giving a full overview of your professional experience in bullet points, no written text in your CV. But in the cover letter, it's a written text, continuous text. So even in the middle, if you're outlining your experience, it should be a fully written text. So don't just copy and paste the qualifications mentioned in the job post. That's something I get very often. But really make the effort to write a full text. And then also avoid a kind of, platitudes and very flowery phrases. It should more be, about expressing yourself in a very reflective and factual way. That's probably very German. I don't know. So it should be kind of personal, there should be a personal touch, but it should also not be too emotional. So just to give you an example, very often, I see applications where people are saying that, I'm a really, really passionate worker, and in my previous job, I managed to do like the perfect job. Everyone was fully satisfied, and I fulfilled all the goals which my previous employer gave me. Achieved all the objectives like 150%. Okay, may sound convincing, but that's a kind of overselling, which is not really common in Germany. So here it's more about keeping it to the facts. So of course you have to showcase that you're a high performer, but don't overemphasize. And then, as I mentioned, give examples. That's much more convincing if you are specific than if you're just using, like general sentences like "I'm a team player." Okay, nice, but everyone can say that they are a team player. But how did you actually show in your previous jobs that you are a team player? That's what makes it interesting, and that's also something which will probably be referred to, when you have an interview. Maybe they will pick up something you mentioned in your cover letter. As a kind of topic to talk about. So I think those were the main aspects I wanted to mention. The top 3 questions, I think I've answered most of them in what I was saying previously, but since I'm getting them like in all of our online meetups and in a lot of my LinkedIn messages, let me just go through them again. Do CV and cover letter have to be in the same language? Yes, they do. So if you write a German cover letter, you need a German CV. If you write a German CV, you need a German cover letter. So it should be either English or German. Don't send them like mixed language documents. That's very confusing. Then, is it mandatory to include my salary expectation? If the company has asked for it, yes, then it's mandatory. If the company has not asked for it, then it's not mandatory. But it can be helpful sometimes just to set expectations. So especially if you're not like a great negotiator, it can be helpful because then you're like, you know, avoiding this part where you have this question in your interview and maybe feel a bit insecure. So, and then it can also make sure that if your salary expectation is way too high, then and the company pays, you know, much less than what you want to earn, then you just, you know, don't enter this process. But then that can also be helpful for you to save time. And then another question I often get is, where can I find good cover letter templates? Well, the one we showed here is a cover letter template we found on Indeed. In general, I think if you Google, you will find a lot of templates. You can also check out the websites of the German official institutions. Like recently, I saw an example on the DART website, for instance. But in general, I have to say, try to use, like, find one or two general examples, but then really adapt with your content. As I said, don't use general sentences. So what I can recommend you to do is sit down and just, you know, write down how you would introduce yourself in an interview or to a friend, and just, you know, write it down, and then afterwards you can fine-tune it and turn it into a proper text. So that's what I usually do. Group it into paragraphs, like in bullet points, and then turn it into a fully written text. Just a general recommendation. So yeah, that was it from my side. As always, leave questions, leave feedback, leave us a comment, like our video. You can also follow our YouTube channel and check out our playlists. We have a playlist on studying in Germany and a playlist on working in Germany, and a lot of free content and advice on how to find a job over here and what application standards are, what recruiters are looking for, and so on. So yeah, stay tuned and see you next time.